Software piracy, the act to steal and use other people's intellectual property, without paying for it. It most certainly is nothing new. Software piracy has been around since the early 80s, and coincidentally, around the same time Shareware was created. Shareware software was generally software that was either distributed for free generously, or by an install pay later scheme. Although this was a success, it also introduced us to the world of software piracy. Although the internet hadn't been invented yet, and Windows was just about getting started at this midpoint in the 80s, with Windows 1.0 and 2.0, physical piracy wasn't uncommon. Software often distributed on floppy disks had no piracy protection whatsoever, so you could just copy files from one floppy to the other and give it to someone for nothing. And this is where Microsoft and many other companies were soon to have a huge piracy problem on their hands. If you didn't know, Windows 1.0 and 2.0 were not technically complete operating systems. They were built on top of MS-DOS and ran as operational environments. This applied to Windows 3.0 as well, which came later in 1990. Windows pirating wasn't a concern at this point because Microsoft had an agreement set out that any computers being produced under this agreement were meant to have Windows pre-installed before use. You still, however, could buy Windows floppy disks, and pirates could distribute them at their will. As MS-DOS games were introduced onto PCs, so were pirating methods. Copies of popular games would end up as illegal shareware amongst friends, and as the internet was just starting up alongside dial-up connection, this made it even easier to pirate than ever. People could drag the files from a floppy disk and upload them to certain websites via dial-up connection. Yes, it would take a while to download via dial-up, but this was the normal back then, and I'm pretty sure pirates didn't care. The scene worsened even more when Windows 95 was released, as it was the first proper Windows operating system to grace the market, and because of this, a Windows 95 floppy or CD-ROM was even more common than say a set of Windows 3.0 floppy disks at the time. This is where Microsoft and many publishers knew they had a piracy battle. As they released Windows 95, serial numbers were introduced to try and combat piracy on not only the operating systems themselves, but also new software and games. Games such as the original Doom famously had "This program is not shareware" written on the title screen to urge people not to pirate. Ad campaigns rolled out to TV in a desperate attempt to try and stop and combat the piracy of software, but did it work? It might have scared a few people, but it didn't stop the pirates in the slightest. During the 90s, there were many cases of people going to jail for distributing illegal programs via the use of dial-up and floppy disks. Shady companies would often distribute floppies, CDs, or downloads with compilations of hundreds of illegal stolen software, both online and offline. This truly was a setting stone for piracy in general. Since then, piracy measures have been gradually toughened. Some software straight up refuses to work if it is pirated, and a lot of smart developers have found ways to lock up their creations if people try to pirate it. But even then, it never seemed to stop the pirates even now, and it's a never-ending battle between software developers and pirates. I said in this video that the 90s had a big battle with piracy, but it was never really over.